Next week is World Mental Health Week, and I thought this was an ideal time to cover a topic that I've been thinking about covering for quite a while, and that is hobby mental health. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm a huge fan of the Warhammer hobby, in case you hadn't guessed from the topic of all my previous videos, and I think that over the years it has been invaluable in helping me manage and kind of curate my mental health. But I do feel that there are also a number of pitfalls related to mental health within the hobby, and I want to address both aspects of that within this video, as well as offering my thoughts on ways in which you can kind of address those potential downfalls. So let me tell you first of all a little bit about my own story. I was about 2 years ago diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and this came about in the aftermath of the death of my mother during COVID. I'm not sure a lot of people have stories about losses of loved ones, or just generally the fairly dark struggle that a lot of us went through during COVID. My story is that my mother had been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer about 2 years prior to COVID breaking out. She'd only been given 6 months to live, but thankfully the chemo treatment that she'd been receiving had been helping her. Unfortunately, when COVID happened, lockdown happened, and the hospitals stopped treating a lot of cancer patients because they didn't want to risk people with already compromised immune systems being exposed to COVID. The side effect of that was that my mother very rapidly went downhill. I was fortunate enough that as a key worker I was able to do my job wherever in the country I was, so I was able to get some accommodation near to where my mother was and then shelter in place at that accommodation, essentially forming a bubble with my mother's household so that I could be there to help care for her in her final months. This, as you might imagine, was not easy, and it affected me deeply, and it left me with some fairly lasting scars that I'm still undergoing counselling for. But what helped me through that time was the Warhammer hobby. Being able to go home at the end of 8-10 hours of caring for my mother, and also putting in a full day of remote working, and just take an hour or two to immerse myself in some way in this great hobby of ours, helped me cope. It helped me stay sane, to be honest. And even now, where I'm undergoing counselling, part and parcel of what my therapist has advised me to do is at the end of each of our session, go and do something that I love, that brings me joy, to help me kind of lift myself out of kind of some of the dark stuff that we talk about during those sessions. In my case, it's Warhammer, and it's a nice, dedicated hour break to do some painting or read a book or play like a Warhammer related video game like Shooters Blood and Teeth. It might not sound like the ideal answer to the end of a therapy session, but you'd be surprised. Nothing like the kind of joyous enthusiasm of the orcs to lift your spirit. But so, in this video, I'm going to talk through what I would suggest are perhaps the 6 or 7 major ways in which this hobby can help your mental health, but also contained within those 6 or 7 areas, the traps that you should be aware of and should perhaps watch out for, and how I would suggest, this is purely my amateur personal opinion, those can be addressed and dealt with. So, okay, let's dive straight in. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is perhaps one of the most obvious ones, is gaming. I'm not currently going to play through a game because it's just me here in my games room on my own at the moment, but Warhammer gaming is perhaps one of the 2 most joyful aspects of the hobby for me, and it's a great way to engage in a collaborative or cooperative way to engage and enjoy the hobby. Playing a game of Warhammer involves, usually at least, 2 people, so it means that I get to interact with one of my friends, or perhaps somebody I've not met before that I can likewise have an automatic shared interest with because we both love the hobby. We both like playing games and want to play a game. Beyond that, I get quite competitive, I get quite excitable playing a game of Warhammer, and that just instantly lifts my mood. It gives me a burst of endorphins and makes me kind of feel almost physically lighter playing a game of Warhammer, if it's a particularly good game. There is, of course, the other side of that equation, which is that if you are having a bad game of Warhammer, if the dice have completely deserted you, or the guy that you're playing is being a complete swine and laughing and pointing, is being like me, unfortunately, sometimes going, oh, yes, go on, dice, hurrah! and is clearly enjoying the game way more than you are, that can have a negative effect on your mental health. So I suppose the first pitfall that we need to be aware of in engaging in this hobby is, at its highest, the highs can be brilliant. At its lowest, it can feel crushing, because not only are you perhaps having a bad day, having a bad game, but you're also having a bad game of something that you clearly love. And that can have its own negative connotations connected to that. Beyond that as well, I talked about this being a game that involves two people, it involves a social aspect. Not everybody has access to that. Some people don't have gamers that they know near them, or they don't have, a large circle of friends who are still engaged in the hobby anymore, and that can feel a little bit lonely or isolating. Equally, there can be issues of social anxiety, where people perhaps don't feel comfortable going out and meeting new people, and that can be a barrier to enjoying the hobby, which can then itself lead to its own kind of elements of depression. These then are the pitfalls related to gaming that I would suggest that you kind of need to watch out for. How would I suggest we address them? How do I address them as best as I can? Well, firstly, I remind myself it's just a game. Yes, it's a game I love. Yes, it's a game I can get absolutely invested in. But at the end of the day, it is just a game. And if the dice are deserting me in this game, if the game is going completely the wrong way upwards and my opponent isn't being anyone who's at all fun to play against, well, there'll be another game. There'll be a different game when the dice perhaps will roll better, when I'll be playing against somebody who's more fun to play against. The factor that I remind myself is, each time I pick up a tape measure and a set of dice, it's just a game. Enjoy it, don't enjoy it, but realise that it's not the end of the world if it doesn't go the way in which you want it to. Beyond that as well, yes, it is a game that generally speaking requires two people, but as COVID showed, you may not always have the luxury of having two people. That doesn't prevent you from enjoying the game. During the height of, I think, Lockdown 3, when I started my Old World project, way before the Old World made its appearance on the gaming tables, I was playing 5th edition fantasy, and I dusted off a couple of classic armies, a dwarf army and an orc army, and just played both sides of the table myself. I looked at it from the point of view of, your opponent might well be able to anticipate what your strategy is. So, whereas in, for example, a game of chess, you might struggle to play against yourself because, well, you know what the strategy you're trying to work against yourself is. In the Warhammer world, the randomizing factor of the dice means that that is not a barrier. You can just play both sides of the table and enjoy the sheer carnage of unleashing both aspects of the two different armies upon each other. There are also a number of Warhammer games that can be played in solo mode. Games Workshop have, over the years, through White Dwarf and through the Warhammer community, published articles and scenarios on how to essentially play against the game itself, how to play a one-man version of Warhammer. So that is of itself also not necessarily a barrier. But the third thing I suppose I would say is, even if you do have crippling social anxiety, remember that Warhammer players are often some of the friendliest geeks that you will meet. And that simply venturing into like your local hobby store and saying, hi, I'd like to get a game in, the store staff will often be willing to give you a game. If they've got the time, and if it's not like a busy Saturday and they're running Saturday Beginners or something, they will often take the time to book you in, get an army out, and give you a game themselves. Warhammer can be a gateway in which you can make new friends, you can make new acquaintances, because like I said, you already all have the same shared interest. Let's move on to painting. One of the areas of the hobby that helped me the most in my time of crisis was painting, and it still does. Being able to take that time in an evening, just maybe an hour before I passed out and went to sleep, ready to get up 6 hours later, even if it was like midnight, I'd still make the time, make that hour to do something creative, to do something expressive with my hands. And that's one of the things that I find perhaps most relaxing about Warhammer painting. It's something you can do in mixed company, it's something you can do on your own. I'm never happier than perhaps when I'm sat on the sofa in the evening with something playing on the TV that I'm kind of half watching, enjoying with my wife, but I'm also just sat with a light over me, painting away at some army project that I'm working on. There is something, I think, almost zen and relaxing about particularly batch painting, just going through, applying a colour scheme that you know in your head is going to create its own narrative theme. There are, of course, hobby pitfalls to watch out for mental health when it comes to painting. Top of the list of that, I suppose, is deadlines. feeling like you have to make the time to paint, feeling like you're painting an army for an event that you're going to go to, feeling like you are failing in some way if you're not engaging in this aspect of your hobby, feeling like you're a failure if the paint scheme doesn't perhaps match up to the vision that you've got in your head, or feeling what I think of as creative envy when you see pictures of other people's miniatures, or see other people's miniatures in person and feel like yours don't quite match up to that. This can be massively stressful, and it can also cause fairly serious depression. It can cause you to feel like you are not doing the thing you love right, which is crazy when you think about it, to be able to do something that you love wrong. There is no wrong way to paint. Whatever way in which you paint your miniatures will be the best way for your miniatures to be painted. That's not to say that there aren't ways in which you can improve your miniatures, and that's something that I'll address in just a second. The other aspect, I suppose, when it comes to painting that you have to watch out for is the stress of trying to find the time, trying to make sure that you do that hour a night. You hear people talk about, oh, do 1 hour a night. What I would say is, don't stress about finding the time, but when you do find the time, enjoy it. So these are my workarounds that I use when it comes to managing hobby painting. And it might be that sometimes the weeks go by when I don't get any painting done because life just gets in the way, and that's okay. First thing I would say is, when you do find the time, find the time. Maybe it's an hour a night, maybe it's an hour a week, maybe it's an hour a month. It doesn't matter. I know a lot of people say, oh, you can't use unpainted miniatures. That's heresy, that's terrible. Why? Why is it terrible? Yes, an aspect of playing this hobby is painting, but not everybody has the time or the necessary skills to paint models, and that's okay. If your love of the hobby is gaming, then that's what you need to do. And even if it's just that your models have been spray undercoated and had a couple of colours very quickly slapped on there, if that has meant that your models are then able to be used on the tabletop and that's what you really want to do with them, then don't stress about it. Don't let it make you feel anxious. Equally, if you do, like me, enjoy painting, don't stress about the quality of the miniatures that you've painted. I've been painting for going on 30 years now, and I still feel like there's a lot that I need to learn on any given day about how miniatures come out. And I often remind myself when I'm painting a miniature that there is a great, big, murky middle section to painting a miniature, in which the miniature often does not look as good as you'd like it to. But then, after a certain tipping point, when you start to get the layers on, when you start to get the highlights on, when you start to get the base on, it will just tip over into something that you're really pleased and really proud of. You'll think, well, why was I worrying about that? In terms of comparing yourself to other people's miniatures, what I would say in that regard is, don't be afraid to ask other people how they achieved an effect. Don't be afraid to say, what colour did you... I really love that shade of blue. It's a comment I often come out with. I really love that shade of blue. How did you do it? And I've got a notebook on my phone which is just full of different paint recipes that other people have told me that I'll then go back and maybe pick up a paint pot that I don't have and try out. I've got Mengel Miniatures Blue I'm going to be trying later on today, actually. But also, don't be afraid to try and improve your painting. One of the things that I enjoy doing is following painting guides. There are some great painting tutorials out there. Two Thin Coats is the one that immediately springs to mind, but also, if you're not going to watch a painting video, if you'd rather just copy something that's written out, well, I've already mentioned Mengel Miniatures does painting guides. Garfy of Tale of Painters does amazing painting guides. Check out Vincent Notley, actually, is another one that's worthy of mention. Check out these painting guides and maybe just try them out. One of the things that I've done that I particularly enjoy doing, back when Duncan was still working for Games Workshop, he did a tutorial on how to paint Putrid Blight Kings. I happened to have a box of Putrid Blight Kings at the time, so I picked up every paint that he said in the tutorial he was going to be using, and I basically painted along. It was a bit like watching an episode of MasterChef or something. I watched the video, paused it while I was doing each step, and worked through until I got the finished result that pretty much perfectly matched what Duncan had done on the screen. And I learned so much from that, and the feeling of pleasure, the feeling of accomplishment that came from painting something that was perhaps far in excess of what I had previously been able to do in that style was amazing. And that can be a way in which you can turn a negative into a positive. The only other factor I would say about when it comes to things like painting, and also I should have mentioned this under the gaming section, is affordability. Games Workshop paints are not cheap. There are other paints out there which are more affordable, so don't feel like you have to use Games Workshop paints. But also, don't feel like you have to use every colour imaginable. There are like 15 different shades of yellow alone. Don't feel that you have to use the exact shade that is mentioned in a tutorial. Sometimes it might be enough to just use a colour that you've got in your paint station that approximately comes close to it. And you might find that you discover something new and interesting by following the technique that's featured in the tutorial with just a slightly different shade. Likewise, when it comes to miniatures, don't feel like you have to have a massive army. Don't feel like you have to buy new models all the time. Don't feel like you have to constantly be buying new things to get them, then rushing to get them painted. Equally, don't feel like you can't buy something new because you haven't painted what you've already got. A term I absolutely hate is pile of shame. Pile of potential is what I call mine. They are potential armies. They are potential new colour schemes that I've yet to discover. Don't let people turn your hobby into a negative for you. Don't let peer pressure of you must have the newest Chinese thing, you must have your army painted in a particular way. This is the cool new way to paint things. Why isn't everybody doing this new way of painting things? Don't let that pressure you from what you feel most comfortable with, because at the end of the day, it's your hobby and it's there to help you feel at one within yourself. And that is why female custodies are amazing. Social media, I mean, it's almost inextricably linked with the hobby now. Games Workshop engage across multiple platforms. They're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're all over YouTube. It is very hard almost to engage with the hobby without in some way also engaging with it online. And that can be a good thing. Let me say now, I affectionately refer to my hobby fam on Twitter, all the various kind of cool hobby creators that I regularly check in on to see what they're painting, to see what games they might have played, to see what they're talking about in relation to the hobby, what new amazing news story has broken, or what new challenge has somebody come up with, you know, like share a picture of yourself and your art, or share a picture of something green. I love nothing more than logging on in the morning and seeing someone go, show me a picture of something green, and then 50,000 orc miniatures descend upon it. There is also, I have to confess, the endorphin high of sharing a picture and seeing the likes tick up. It is scientifically proven that we are, to a lesser or greater degree, addicted to our phones, especially where social media is concerned. And I'm fully at one with the fact that I will share stuff, in particular these YouTube videos, and then be sat there staring at the app, watching for likes and views and comments and wanting to engage with them. And there's a reason for that, because it does make us feel good. Beyond that as well, it makes us feel like we're part of something bigger. And again, like I said, I refer to the Twitter hobby fam. I have various Facebook groups that I'm a member of that I love engaging with and seeing what different projects they're up to or using as a way to plan and organise games. I'm on the Warhammer Discord, the Paint Slam Discord, the Hate Club Discord, hate standing for Hackney Area Tabletop Enthusiasts, where, again, all kinds of content creation sharing goes on there. People sharing videos they've been working on, people sharing armies they've been working on, or talking about games, or sharing battle reports. There is a host of different ways in which you can engage with the hobby now that makes you feel like you are part of the hobby, and can make you feel like perhaps you're not alone. I mean, heck, one of the Facebook groups I recently came across that is by far one of the greatest Facebook groups I have ever come across is the Dad Hammer support group. There are 2 requirements to join that group. You have to be a dad and you have to like Warhammer. That's it. But the things that are talked about on there, I would say about 75% of the posts that go into that group are not actually about Warhammer. They're about being a dad. And it's an amazing environment in which dads, who are linked only by otherwise their shared love of a particular hobby, can come together and offer each other support, answer questions, address fears or concerns. It is by far the single greatest Facebook group that I've come across thus far, in terms of every time I look at something on there, it is filled with warmth and positivity and gives me a little glow inside. I've made some amazing friends through hobby social media. The people I've never actually met in person, but I engage with every day, chatting to online, which takes me back in many respects to my kind of early days of the hobby when I was things like Yahoo Groups and Warseer, where you would chat on forum boards about different aspects of the hobby, or you'd engage in, I remember being part of a Warhammer play-by-email role-playing game back in the day, where we would essentially write long-form text documents, basically short stories about what our characters were doing, and then somebody else would pick up the narrative thread and write the next chapter of the story from their character's point of view. I miss those, by the way, and if anybody ever knows of anywhere where that type of thing is still going on since kind of those Yahoo Groups and that particular Warseer channel closed down, let me know, because if it's a Discord or something, I will be there. I'm well up for doing something like that again, because I loved that narrative style of roleplay. But it has to be said that social media is also an eminently toxic place, and that is perhaps no more clearer than hobby social media. So this is a huge, obvious red flag pitfall when it comes to hobby mental health. It can be a very dark place. There can be aggressive, angry memes that can be shared. There can be hate-filled rants. YouTube itself is filled with any number of content creators who do nothing more than make negative videos about Warhammer. This is why the hobby is failing. Oh my god, look at Games Workshop did wrong now. Oh my god, the hobby is ending as we know it. Games Workshop stock prices in the toilet because left-wing conspiracy theorists are taking over my goldfish. I get it. It can be a scary place. What would I say, and how do I address this? Well, firstly, what I would say is don't be afraid not to engage. You choose who you engage with. Much like if you were walking down the street and somebody suddenly came up to you and started ranting away going, "Female custodies is a woke conspiracy plot," you wouldn't stop and talk to them. You would just walk away from them as hurriedly as you could, or possibly call the authorities to make sure that they could be taken care of. Likewise, online, use the block button. Use groups that you know are safe to open up to, especially if you're feeling in a particularly kind of fragile mental state. Be willing to go, okay, this is not a safe place for me to be right now over here on Twitter. I'll stick to this Discord group that is full of people, only people that I know. I'll stick to this Facebook group that is full of people only that I know. I'll stick to just talking to my friends in this one small corner of the internet. And that's okay. Beyond that as well, though, what I would say is, even if you don't use the block button, don't feel like you have to engage with them. Don't give in to hobby doom scrolling. Oh, it's just page after page after page of people ranting about female custodies. Don't feel like you have to look at that. Look at just your follows. Look at the people who are only the people you want to hear from. Move over to things like the Discord groups and just chat there. Check out only YouTube channels, hopefully including this one, that make you feel okay within yourself. Hobby social media can be a great thing. It can be a great way to get validation for the hobby that you use. It can be a great place to pick up tips or talk about the hobby that you love. In the same way that walking into a Warhammer store back in 20 years ago could be just a great way of chatting to our like-minded gamers. But if you found the guy who's got the Iron Cross painted Black Templars with suspicious red banners with a swastika on, do exactly like you would do if you'd walked into them in a store. Just walk away from them. Reading a good book can absolutely be a way to help treat your mental health. And in that respect, the Warhammer world has you covered. There are hosts of stories from Black Library that cover the whole gamut of the different universes of Warhammer, whether it's the Old World, the Age of Sigmar, or the 41st or 31st millennium. What I would say is, if you're looking for a way to perhaps put your troubles to one side for a while, to do something that allows you to de-stress, relax, that's low impact. I mean, you can do it laying down like I am here. You can do it on the train on the way into work, or sat in a comfy chair in front of a fire, or outside under a tree. Doesn't matter where you do it. You can just immerse yourself for a while in a world that is familiar, therefore comforting to you. If it's a book, for example, that you've read before with characters that you already know and love, then almost hearing the author's voice again, if I can put it in that way, can be like hearing an old friend, or revisiting characters that you know and love can be like revisiting old friends. If you're feeling lonely, it can feel like having somebody that you know and love there with you. There are one or two pitfalls that you still need to watch out for. If you're feeling quite stressed or perhaps a bit fragile or depressed, then I would recommend steering away from some of the Black Library novels. The 41st Millennium in particular is a dark and depressing place at times, and it might not be the escapism that you are looking for. Likewise, if there is a book series with characters that you particularly know and love, then just as reading them again can feel like revisiting an old friend. If, as unfortunately happens quite often in Warhammer novels, one of those characters were to die, it can feel a bit like losing an old friend. So what I would say is this: pick your book carefully. If it's one that you've read before, then you kind of know what to watch out for, but otherwise there are some excellent review sites out there, places like Goodreads, or you can just ask for recommendations from other hobbyists that you know. If, like I say, you're perhaps feeling a bit low, you want something to lift your mood, then maybe aim for something like an adventure novel, like the Gotrek and Felix novels, or pick something like Caiaphas Cain or the Blood Bowl novels, which are specifically designed to be more light-hearted and funny. The other thing I suppose I should mention is not everybody's got the patience or the ability to sit down for an hour or two and just get lost in a good book. Literacy can be an issue, and likewise there can be problems with attention span. What I would say in that regard is don't feel like the Warhammer novels are a closed book to you, if I can put it in those terms. There are plenty of other ways in which you can immerse yourself in them, most notably audiobooks. Particularly Audible have a whole range of brilliant recordings by some excellent narrators, and equally, like, audio plays, essentially, with different narrators reading different characters, which can be great fun and can add a real extra dimension to the Black Library books. But so don't feel like you are excluded in that regard. There are different ways in which you can enjoy the books.
Playing Warhammer video games can absolutely be the perfect way to engage in the hobby. There are a host of different video games out there, from side-scrolling shoot-em-ups like this one, or the bolt gun shooter, to immersive role-playing games, to mass strategy games. The benefit of these, I suppose, from a hobby mental health point of view, first and foremost, is that they don't take much in the way of outlay. I mean, once you've got the console and you've got the video game, that's it. There's no further things you need to buy. There's no further things you need to paint. So if this is how you choose to consume your Warhammer hobby, then once you've made that initial outlay, you're sorted. Beyond that as well, they can be an awful lot of fun. They can be quite silly. You don't have to take them quite seriously, and you don't need to play against other people if you don't want to. You can just play a lot of the video games against the computer or against yourself. So from that point of view as well, if you don't have access to a wide-ranging gaming group, or if there isn't anyone near to you that you can kind of game with, then you're still okay to participate. The other thing, I suppose, that needs to be taken into consideration with regards to video games, though, is they can be a bit of a time sink. Like, I know of myself, for example, that if I start playing something like Civilization, then I can just lose 12 hours. It's much the same, I suppose, with a lot of the Warhammer video games, that once you get engrossed in the world, or you get fixated on trying to beat a particular level, you can find yourself a little bit addicted to it. You can find that you perhaps put other more important things to one side, and that can be a bit of a detriment to your mental health. The best way that I can suggest dealing with that is set yourself limits and play in moderation. And if you find yourself getting, stuck on a level, or particularly frustrated with it, like at the moment I'm trying to remember how to get up to the next level to go and shoot that commissar, then it's just a case of put it down for a little while, go away, have a little bit of a break, take a break from the screen, and then perhaps go and revisit it with fresh eyes and a fresh attitude. Let's move on.
Let's move on to something a little bit more light-hearted. Let's move on to something that perhaps is a little bit out of left field. I'm talking about Garden Hammer. Let me say from the start, I am aware that not everybody has a nice garden space like I do, in which they can go and sit outside and paint, and that's okay. There are plenty of other areas in which you can still enjoy the hobby in the outdoors. Like I've previously mentioned, go sit under a tree or up a tree, safely, and read a Black Library novel. Go and find a friendly beer garden or something and see if they'll let you play a game of Warhammer, Warhammer Underworld or something tabletop based like that, or Aeronautica Imperialis if you've still got a set of that, whilst enjoying a nice pint of real ale or something, or non-alcoholic beverage. What is the benefit of Garden Hammer? I mean, why is it even a thing? I would suggest it's this. There have been scientific studies that have proven there is a benefit to mood and mental health by being outdoors. There is a reason that people say, go touch grass. Step away from the screen, step away from, the indoor environment and go and touch nature. I'm doing it literally right now. I'm sat here barefoot in my garden, my toes wriggling in the nice, cool, long green grass that I need to cut. There is a psychological benefit to being outdoors, to hearing the sounds of nature. I can hear birds tweeting. There's a butterfly that is, you can't see it, but is literally fluttering right over there. There is a gentle breeze that is wafting across me whilst the sun is shining where I sit here under my little canopy. Should I want to, I could retract the canopy and have more natural light, which is beneficial from a painting point of view. It helps me make sure that the colours I'm putting on the miniature look right and they are the colours that I want them to be there. But also, there is a medical benefit to vitamin D. I mean, take all the necessary precautions that you have to, but sunlight and being able to absorb vitamin D from it is uplifting, and health-wise, it can give you a boost. I regularly enjoy just sitting out here in the summer and getting my painting done. I actually do more of my painting out here in the summer than I do in my games room because it gets a bit too hot in there. But likewise, I like getting a couple of tables out here and playing games in the summer. I've already played a game of Warhammer the Old World out here. I'm planning on playing another one in a couple of weeks and hopefully filming it as a battle report. But also, gardens you often have a lot more space in than you do indoors. You could get, if you've got the capacity, you could get multiple tables set up out here, and I could run a mini tournament or a mini campaign weekend right here in my own back garden. Back during COVID, Garden Hammer was the #1 way of socially distanced gaming. And I mean, still, if you've got health issues, or if you've got anxiety issues and you don't have the space indoors, but you do have a garden, you can get together with friends in an outdoor space and game. Even if you don't have the space for, as many people don't have the space for a dedicated gaming room inside your house. What pitfalls do you have to watch out for? Well, we've just mentioned one of them. First of all, make sure if you're going to be out enjoying the sunshine, either come into the shade or put some sunscreen on. Bugs bug spray can sometimes be necessary, or before now I've literally had to deal with fauna attacking the tabletop. I had a jackdaw land on the table last year and try to make off with some of my dice, which was pretty impressive. Take the necessary precautions to ensure that your lovely toys that you spent so much time on playing aren't going to suddenly fall off, get muddy, get crushed in the dirt, and watch the weather. Check the weather report to make sure you're not going to suddenly find it, like I did last year when I was playing a big game of 40k for my 40th, have to suddenly, with the help of friends, pick the table up and shuffle it inside because it started chucking it down. That's really kind of just a strange little coda, right? I wanted to throw on the end of the hobby mental health. I don't think it's something that gets talked about enough for its mental health benefits of being able to still enjoy this hobby in an outdoor setting.
One other aspect of the hobby that I think we need to reflect on is list writing. This may sound like an odd thing to get excited about, but it is something that I have loved about this hobby pretty much since I first got into it. There is an aspect of Warhammer that is akin to creating a role-playing game character. If you've never done a roleplay, you might not kind of get what I'm talking about, but essentially a creative aspect where you are creating something through both just a combination of numbers and a visualization of how it might appear in your mind. I went through any number of happy evenings as a kid armed with only one tool, and it's this, a Warhammer roster pad. I would happily just sit of an evening with a stack of army books next to me, a roster pad, a trusty pencil, a calculator, and just dream up lists of different armies that I could make from the models I had in my existing collection, or the models that I might want to get based upon the army books that I owned. This is something that I still find quite zen and quite relaxing, and there are awesome tools out there now that can help you in this. In particular, Warhammer Army Builder is worthy of mention. I have that on my phone, and it's something that
Let me give an example. I am not a happy flyer. I do not belong in the sky. The only way in which I would be happy in the sky, I think, is if I was mounted on the back of a flying horse with a Valkyrie. But Army Builder works offline, and there are any number of kind of slightly fraught and nervous flights that I have spent just sat happily chunking away, working out different army lists for different games that have helped me reach a state of kind of zen calm within myself and bear up to the fact that I'm supported only by the laws of physics and a thin sheet of metal that somebody else constructed at the lowest bidder's cost. Likewise, there are new tools that have become available. Games Workshop have made their own, which work to a degree, and there is the Warhammer, the Old World Army Builder, which is absolutely worth checking out. That's really cool and just keeps getting better. The benefit, I suppose, that this has from a mental health point of view is you don't need anything more than your imagination and a decent grasp of maths, oh dear, I'm in trouble, to create different army lists. The immediate and obvious pitfall is that army lists can very quickly turn into shopping lists. And, I mean, Warhammer is expensive enough, it's getting more expensive. The risk that you have to set yourself is that you may come up with the most amazing army list imaginable, but don't immediately feel like you have to rush out and buy the stuff that is on that list. That, I suppose, is the main thing I would set as a cautionary stance in that regard. Enjoy writing lists, but tell yourself from the offset that even if you come up with the world's most amazing list, there is no need to buy everything that is on that list straight away. I'll give you a perfect example. I love old editions of 40k. I particularly love kind of 3rd and 4th edition, where there was a whole range of amazing codices that came out. And thankfully, Army Builder has a 3rd edition rules pack, essentially, so you can build army lists using all of the codexes that were published during 3rd edition. One army that I had way back in 3rd edition, but sadly no longer have, was a Lost and the Damned army that was created using the Eye of Terror codex. I recently rediscovered my love for that codex, and I've written an army list on Army Builder, and I keep staring at it and thinking I don't have any of the stuff that is on there, but in my head I can already visualise how I would build an army out of the kits that are available today. But I know that I have no pressing need to run out and buy those kits. I'm not going to go and play a game of 3rd edition anytime soon. I've got friends who do occasionally indulge me and play older editions of 40k. I have got a vague idea of running a 3rd edition or a 4th edition campaign weekend at some point. But that's all for the future. That is not something that I need to do right now. And once I accepted that fact, once I kind of realised that just the act of creating the list and being able to visualise it in my head could be enough, then I felt more at one with it. Okay, that then is the end for this hobby mental health video, with one exception. There is one final message that I'd like to give you as kind of a takeaway from this video, and it's this: know your limits. Warhammer is an addictive hobby in much the same way as gambling or drinking. It is very much an addictive pastime that can consume your life if you don't set yourself limits. Especially with the whole kind of fear of missing out style marketing that Games Workshop seems to have embraced in recent years. Do not allow this hobby to become harmful to you. Play as long as it is fun. Have fun doing this hobby. And I really do. You hope you have as much fun as I do with this hobby. But when it stops being fun, when it starts to hurt, stop. I genuinely wish you all the very best. Stay safe out of there. Be well. Be happy, have fun, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.